Good afternoon, Math 152 students. In this video, we'll take a look at troubleshooting some StatCrunch and my MATLAB problems in 3.3.1. So notice I've opened 3.3.1 and I have some group data. I have the weights of newborns and the numbers of babies corresponding to that weight group in thousands. So normally if I want the mean and standard deviation, I go to Summary Stats and choose columns. But here, instead of one column, I actually have two. So I have grouped or bin data. And my bins are my groups, where I have my groupings, and the counts are my frequencies. We discussed in class if we were going to do this by hand, our midpoint for our first category would be halfway between the consecutive lower limits, or we would pinpoint that first midpoint at 500. So this is the way our book chooses to do it, which in StatCrunch we need to make sure we choose the consecutive lower limits option. However, there is one thing that can go wrong. StatCrunch has some problems. StatCrunch has some problems of knowing how to do the midpoint for this last bin because I don't have another class to start my next lower limit. So what I'm going to do is show you what StatCrunch will do if you just select the bins, counts, consecutive lower limits, and then I'll show you how to do a fix. So notice it gives me a mean and standard deviation. But again, sometimes you're going to run into problems with my not liking those numbers. Here's the way around that. What we need to actually tell StatCrunch is kind of a roundabout way to kind of fool StatCrunch. We need to tell it how to compute that next midpoint, or that last midpoint. What we really want it to do is use a midpoint of 5,500. So I need to tell it that my next bin is going to start, like all the others, at 6,000. So even though I have nobody in that weight group, I'm going to add a bin and have 0 frequency. This will tell StatCrunch how to do that last midpoint, and it should fix most of our problems. So go to Summary Stats, I'm choosing my same consecutive lower limits, and I'm going to compute. So notice this table on top if I want to compare. I've got very similar means. To 2 decimal places, I get 0.49, 0.49 here. They're the same, but if you go up to 3, we're going to start to see some differences. Same thing with our standard deviation. We're going to see some differences in the 3rd decimal place. So try this tip and let me know if you run into other issues.